Hello, everybody. First of all, sorry for not being in person due to the current situation. My flight got disrupted and I have to do this remotely, but still I'm very excited to be here with you today. And let me start with just a little bit of a history lesson, I guess. You see, in the early days of the World Wide Web, back in the primordial soup of 1993, something was missing. We had this incredible tapestry of interconnected documents, a vast universe of information just waiting to be explored. Yet it felt a bit like a library where you could only read the books, never check one out, or leave a note in the margin. The web was a one-way street. The brilliant minds behind the web, Tim Berners-Lee and his team, had given us the foundations of a revolution. But that revolution itself was missing something. It needed a spark. And that spark came 2 years later in the form of a seemingly unassuming element, the HTML form element, which was only added 2 years later in HTML2. It was not part of the original spec. And now you could fill out an order form, you could send feedback to a website owner, you could participate in an online discussion. The web was now turned from a platform to consume information to a place where you can create and interact. The floodgates were opened. Suddenly, we had a standardized way of sending data back to the server, and that act of sending data transformed the web into the vibrant, collaborative space we know today. It gave us the power to collaborate, communicate, and connect with others in ways we had never imagined. The web was now a two-way street, a bustling marketplace of ideas and interactions. But that newfound power also brought its challenges. With the ability to communicate came the issue of validation. How do we ensure that the information that is being generated and shared is correct, reliable, and safe? And with the ability to collaborate came the issue of moderation. How do you manage the vast amounts of information being generated and shared? And I think this is a story of that missing piece, that little form element that transformed the revolution. And it's also the success story of the web that turned the web from just a place to consume information to the most widely active application delivery platform on the web. So let me introduce myself. My name is Evyatar Alush. I'm a software engineer at Meta in Tel Aviv, and I build an open source library that I will talk to you about today, and also will write some code in. But before that, maybe I'll share a bit about my family and myself. So I'm Evyatar. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Shoham, with which I love to travel the world, and I am also the humble servant of this mighty creature. No Stockholm Syndrome. No. Okay, but let's talk back about form validation, because this is the interesting story. And in the world of form validation, I think we have two types of form validation. First of all, we have server-side form validation that we do for security and integrity. It means that the data that's coming into the server is reliable, is safe to store in the database, and also safe to present to other users later. But we also have client-side form validation. And this is used mostly for user experience, so that the users know in advance before submitting the form that what they're going to send to the server is actually going to be accepted. And my framework, the tool that I built, actually handles both of them, and it's called VEST. VEST is a form validation framework that's inspired by the syntax and style of unit testing libraries like Mocha and Jest, and this is why the name VEST, Validation Test. Now, usually, when you think about form validation, you see something like this. So you have a form. This is an example in React, but it doesn't have to be. It looks pretty much the same like for the past 20 years. So you have your form handler and change handler, and then you add some place to manage some state, and then, I don't know, you add some validation logic, and inside of that, you start writing if it's too short or too long, and you add some more code, and yeah, it gets very ugly, very gnarly, very complex, very fast. So no, I don't want that. Nobody wants that, of course. And many have tried to fix that, and I have too. So before we dive into the solution itself, let's see inherently what are the problems that I think we have in form validation. And I think we have three problems. One is a lack of structure. So you know you want to validate your form, but there is no dedicated place in your feature that you put it, the form validation. There is no specific structure or syntax that you write your form validation in. And we'll dive into schema validation in a second, but there is no inherent structure. And then when you come back to maintain it, like years later, months later, weeks later, and you want to add something that a product manager did not intend on adding in the first place, or you want to make a change or make it feel depend on one another, you can actually go in and disassemble everything and reassemble everything, but you shouldn't be touching your feature and reverse engineer everything you've done in the past just to make it work now. And this is usually the case when we work with forms, unfortunately. And the worst thing, I think, is that forms are the interaction-heavy parts of our apps, which means that is where users touch, click, type, scroll, navigate. That's where they do all their interactions. Everything else is like they're scrolling and viewing content and watching videos, but in forms, they're actually doing stuff. And also, forms are usually what brings the money. This is where the users pay. This is where they post content. This is actually the core of our business, is almost always inside forms. And unfortunately, forms are also the most difficult to test, because every time you want to write a unit test for forms, well, what do you have to do? You have to simulate the user event, make sure that the validation actually worked, and do all that stuff just to test the validation logic. And if something is difficult to test, it means that it doesn't get tested, or it doesn't get tested well. And the problem with that is, well, we said that this is where the users touch and click and type the most. So this is where they are most likely to experience bugs, and this is also where the money comes from. So if we don't test that, we end up having bugs and we end up losing money. And these are the three main problems I think we have with forms. And I must not have been the first person to write a form validation library, right? Yeah, no, I'm not the first person. We have tens of thousands. This is a screenshot from 3 years ago, but that's only because NPM now truncates it to 6,000 and doesn't let you see past that. But really, there are tens of thousands of validation libraries on NPM. So why is Vest anything better than the rest? And it's valid. That's a valid question. I would ask that too. I actually try to see what is my business benefit, what is my value proposition when building Vest. And well, I think that to understand why Vest is better, or at least very specialized for form validation, I think we need to understand how form validation actually looks like and what other types of form validation solutions we have in existence. So we're going to go through a bit of history, and then we'll dive right into Vest. So the most basic type of form validation libraries that we have is functional matchers. We get functions that tell us, give us a Boolean response if something is what we expect it to be. So for example, is email true or false? Is number true or false? That's the core essence of form validation, just Boolean responses for basic questions. But this doesn't answer user interaction. This doesn't answer structure. It just saves us time writing the validation logic ourselves. So it's really crucial. It's really essential, but that's not something that will solve us the problems that we talked about in form validation. But cool, we have to have that. Now, second, we have schema validation, and the most popular one today in the JavaScript ecosystem is Zod, but we have Valibot and Joy and Yup and Happy and a bunch of them. And this is the next step in evolution from functional matchers. It takes the idea of functional matchers and say, well, we have a shape of data. We don't just handle the username and the email. We handle it as a shape of data. And the problem is with a schema is that it's a really, really essential tool and a really, really smart tool, but it's mostly good for API, backend APIs, because in the client, the user doesn't type in a schema. The user is typing a field. which means that they type in the username and then don't type the entire username, they type a single character. And then they type in another one, and another one, and another one. And for each of these, you tell me you want to validate the entire schema for each of the fields, for each of the keystrokes. How do you handle even user interaction in a schema? Because the user doesn't think in schemas, they work in forms. So it's really, really important to be able to validate our data as a whole, but it might not be the same and the best solution for form validation, because it adds more performance issues, because you have to validate everything and then keep state of what the user actually touched, and you have to maintain a lot of this complexity yourself, or use another third-party library that does it for you. So it's nice, but it's not necessarily what we want for forms. And lastly, like the holy grail for form validation, we have, I don't really have a name for it, but it's a framework-specific form state management. So we have React use for hook form, and we have Formic, and we have Validate for Vue, and we got a bunch of them. And these are really nice because they let you, they basically give you some elements, components, directives, references, event handlers, whatever it is that your framework chose supports. And then it does the validation logic for you. And this is really nice because it maintains the states and it handles everything. But the issue with it is that, well, it takes a lot of the control from you. Because if you want to do something that it doesn't support, well, you're out of luck, because it owns your UI and not just your form logic. And not just that, it means that you're kind of vendor locked, because if you're using an Angular specific library, but you want to use your form validation logic in Node as well, so you have isomorphic validation, well, that's a tough one. If you want to refactor, well, that's a tough one, because your logic is coupled with your UI. And I took all that and I said, well, I think we can do a little bit better. And let's talk about unit tests, because I told you Vest is inspired by the syntax and styles of unit testing libraries. And what does that mean? So let's take a classic unit testing scenario for a calculator, for example. So we have the add function, for example, and we have it described. It describes what it is that we want to do when we have a test, and we say that it combines two numbers. That's nice. And then we write our assertion, expect. And we say we expect add 1 and 2 to equal, obviously, 3. And that's the same for every other test that we want to add for our form, for our unit test and our feature. And I was like, that's pretty similar to the way I think about forms, because just think about it. In a form, we have our construct, let's say, our describe. This is our form, for example, adding a user. And then we have different fields that we want to test that they match something. So let's try that. So let's say we have our describe, user registration, and we say username is required and it must be at least 3 characters. Okay, that's nice. That's nice. It already starting to look like something we could use. And then let's say expect data.username is not empty and longer than or equals 3. That's nice. We got to get the data from the form, okay? And lastly, we have to tell it which field in the form we're actually testing. And just like that, we turn it to enforce, because enforce is nicer than expect for form validation, and rename the name of the suite, the validation suite. And this is the core essence of Vest. We take a unit testing library and we turn it into a form validation library, building upon the knowledge and understanding that our developers already have, because they know how to write unit tests, because all developers write unit tests, because everybody writes unit tests, right? Right? So building upon that knowledge of existing unit testing libraries, and then turning it into something that's very familiar, but does something just slightly different, running in production. And I wanted to write some code with you and show you how Vest looks like, how Vest feels, and yeah, let's try to do that. So I'm going to open VS Code. I hope you can see my screen, and yeah, we have a basic form. And again, this is React, but it doesn't have to be React. We're not going to focus on the fact that this is React, but I will show you what we have and how it works at the moment. So we have this application with a sign up, and yeah, this is the form. And currently, we don't have any validation, and we're going to write some validation together. So let me have a sip of water. Now, this is a live demo, and I'm not seeing you really, so you can tell me if I make typos or mistakes. So I'm all on my own here. Cool. So this is the form. We have input for username, and it's a basic input component that just saved some class names and everything and pending indicator inside just to save us time, but I will show you what I added. So I added a pending prop that will make it turn here, the spinning circle. That's nice. I added a few class names already. So for example, we have error that turns it red. We have, I think it's valid, that turns it green. And I added warning that turns it orange. And lastly, the last thing that I added to that form is a message prop. For example, username is required, and you're going to see it here. That's all that I already prepped. Everything else we're going to write together, and it's going to be super, super fun, I hope, or devastating. Yeah, okay. So let's open a new file, and I'll call it registration form suite. This is the user registration form suite that I will write my Vest suite in. So let's do import as Vest from Vest. Cool. And also I'll import specific stuff from Vest. And no, I don't need extend. Okay, let's do test, enforce, and we'll stay with that in for a moment. And now I'll write a new suite, vest.create, and oh my god, I don't need GitHub Copilot here, I think. Let's disable it. Yeah, okay. And I write user registration. So this is going to be a user registration form, and we're going to initialize it with some data. And yeah, oh no, I have already a type for it. I don't remember the name of it. Yeah, user registration state. So let's take this. Yeah, okay. And now let's try, let's start writing some form validation tests. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write a new test, and I'll call it username for the field username. And I'm going to say username is required. And all I'm going to do is now write data, enforce that data.username is not blank. And as I do that, nothing will happen because I'm not using it in the form yet, but I just want to show you how easy it is. So I'll export the suite, and I'll go back to the form. So I'm going back to the form, and right here, I'm going to, in my change handler, just call that suite with the new data. So I'm going to call the suite with the next state, and the next state, again, is the form state and the value of the new field. Okay, I'll import the suite. Cool. And again, nothing will happen because I need to show it in the messages of the form. So I'm going to do messages. And here what I'm going to do is write suite.getMessage for username. And if I start typing inside username, you'll not see anything because username is not empty. But I remove, and just like that, without adding much logic to the form, we have username is required. So I'm going to write now a few more tests, and we'll make it more advanced as we go. So let's go back to the suite, and I think, yeah, I think it's a little bit too big, so I'll just shrink it down to, yeah, okay. And let's write a few more tests. So username must be at least 3 characters. And let's say longer than 2, because 3 is longer than 2. And let's do the same for password, because password and username are very similar right now. So let's do password must be at least 5 characters because that's a strong password, or equals 5. Yeah, I just spiced it up with or equals. And now let's take that and copy the same thing for password. We'll get to email very soon. Okay, so I type inside username, and oh my god, you seeing that? I'm typing inside username, and we have password is already lighting up, and this is kind of annoying because I told you we don't want that. For example, in schema validation, we don't want to be validating everything when we just write inside of the username field. So what do we do here? Well, in the world of unit tests, we get like this experience when we can write only. So this is what I'm going to do here as well. I'm going to write only, and that's going to be coming from Vest, and I'm going to tell it only validate the current field that the user is interacting with. And this is going to be like that. So I'm going to pass it to the suite. It's not just going to know which field the user is interacting with, because Vest does not interact directly with the DOM. It does not handle the DOM. So I'm going to pass it the name of the field. And it's going to be optional, really. I think it should be optional because later on we're going to do some cool stuff with it. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, so now as I type inside username, we're seeing that only username lights up, and when I type inside password, only then it lights up. Okay, that's very cool. Now let's do some colors, because I promised you colors, and colors are pretty, and I like pretty things. But Vest is not a UI library. It handles data in, data out. But it does understand that it works in the world of form validation, where you actually do need to work with some colors and UI state. So let's import class names from Vest. Const cn equals class names. And it's a small function that lets you take the validation result and turn it into understandable class name. So for example, I'll take suite.get. Okay, this is the most up-to-date result of the suite, and I'll say that when it's valid, the class name that I want to show is valid. When it's invalid, the class name that I want to show is error, and when it's warning, the class name that I want to show is warning. Okay, that's cool. And all I need to do now is, and let's do that for all of the fields, really. So let's take just the name of each one of those. So I'll go here and here, here and here and here and here. And let's do class name equals cn, and then I'll take just the name. Yeah, okay. So I'm taking this, and as I start typing inside username, we'll see that it's already turning red. And as I keep typing, it's turning green. Okay, cool. Now let's do some email. Now email validation is complex. I don't know if you know that, but the regular expression for email is like a 40-line regular expression, and that's not something I wanted to add to Vest like inherently, because not all forms actually need to validate email. And again, I didn't want to add this float into the library. So instead, what I decided to do is add it as a small extension. So let's import the email validation to Vest. So let's import Vest and force email. And when I do that, I get validations for email. So test email is invalid. And let's do enforce data.email is email. Now, if I do that and I go to the email field, and let's add also messages suite.getMessage. Let's do also the same for confirm, just so we have everything ready already. What we're going to see here is that when I type email is invalid and gmail@gmail.com, it's green. Cool. And now we have some more things that we can do. So for example, in the world of form validation, we have some things validations that are not failing the validation. We have validations that actually allow us to continue, like password strength. It's telling you that something is off, but it's allowing you to continue. And in most validation libraries, there is no such distinctions. There is either optional or required, but there's no warning. There is no, so you have to do it in a separate thread, in a separate place, and then shove it into the form. And I want to show you how Vest handles it. So before that, I want to disable the submission if the form is invalid, and then I can show it to you. So I'll do disabled, and I'll say it's only disabled when not suite.isValid. So when the suite is not valid, the registration button will be grayed out, and I'll start typing. Yeah, password 1, and we don't have a confirmation yet, so that's why it's turning blue. Let's add a quick one for confirm, and then we'll do the rest. So test, and this is something that's really, I should focus more on, because it's really difficult to do in schema validation, but really easy to do with Vest. So confirm, and let's say passwords do not match, data.confirm equals data.password. Okay, I'll skip that, and now let's do the warning part for the password, because this is the interesting part. Password, password is weak, maybe add a number. And all we need to do is matches, so some regular expression, and let's say 0 to 9, yeah, that. And what we want to do is add vest.warn. Vest.warn means that this is a warning one. And I did not change anything in the form for this, but already, if I start typing, so password, and already it's turning orange and not red. And how do I know that it actually works correctly? So let's type inside of everything, example@gmail.com, and it's turning blue, and I'll now remove it. So let's also do this, and again, my email, password, and now it's warning, password, and it's allowing me to register because it's only a warning and it's not failing, so the suite is valid even though it has some warnings inside. Okay, so this is all very basic, very base case. But what would we have like more advanced stuff, like async validations, like if we want to add some, is the username already taken? Let's do that. And in other places, it's quite difficult, but let's see how easy it is to do with Vest. So let's another test for username, and say username already taken. And Vest allows us to write an async validation that goes out to the server. So we annotate it with async like we do in unit tests. And what we want to do now is our already created a function does user exist function here. And all it does, it goes to the DB and checks if the user exists. So await does user exist with data.username, and const exists equals that, and all I do is enforce exists is falsy. And well, if I type, nothing will happen because there needs to be some state update. So for example, I know that the username is taken, but it's not showing me the spinner. So let's add some spinner. So let's do pending equals suite.isPending for username. Is username field is pending, which is pretty cool. Okay, we got 5 minutes left. And okay, so I'll type inside, and we're seeing the spinner, and it's not ending, because when it's ending, we actually gotta tell Vest or tell React, sorry, to update the states. So what we'll do here is go here and tell Vest after. So when you're done, so after, very similar to what we have in unit tests, and this is like a React thing. I just gotta update the state. So I'll just refresh the state of the form. There are nicer ways, but this is the fastest one that I can do in a presentation. I'm just refreshing the form. And I'm typing my username, and in a few seconds, it's telling me that it's already taken. But if I type again, well, I don't want it to go to the server again and again and again and again. I want it to just remember it. So we could write a memoization function, but why should we? Vest can do that for us. So I'll go back to Vest, to the form, and I'll do, instead of that, test.memo. And here, I'll say memoize it by the name of the user, so data.username. And yeah, that's all I needed to do. And now as I type my username, you'll see the spinner. I'll type another username, and it's turning green. And if I remove one character, it should just, well, immediately show us the result. So this is the cool part. Wait for it, wait for it. I'm just, yeah, it was immediate. So Vest saved us all the time and effort of writing our custom memoization for it. And what about, well, what about multiple async validations at once? So for example, what if I added also another one for the email? So let's do test email, and already taken. Let's do the same. It's going to be very simple, and it's going to be an async validation. I don't care about memoization here. And let's do const exists. Await, does email exist? Yeah, sure. And enforce exists is false, is falsy. And again, I'm going to do that same thing inside of the is pending for the email. So is pending for email. And the nice thing about Vest here is that, well, let's tell it after each. And after each field, it will update the state. And the nice thing is that the email validation here in my scenario takes a lot of time, and the username is fast. And usually we would have to synchronize it ourselves in the suite. But if I type, for example, code@alush.com, and oh, it was pretty fast. Let's make it take a little more time. So wait 1 second. Just simulate this slow validation, and code@alush.com, Alush, and now you'll see that one is finishing before the other, and we don't have to synchronize the state. So Vest is doing all this for us. And let's yeah, so let's type everything inside, and password 1. And because all this is actually JavaScript, there is no problem writing it all in the server. Now, we're a bit out of time, so I won't go into the server-side validation of it, but I will just tell you it works, which is really, really nice. Vest works with everything that you have in your arsenal, every library, every tool, everything that runs JavaScript or TypeScript. You can install it with npm install Vest. The documentation website is vestjs.dev. You can follow me on Twitter, X, or any of the other ones. And yeah, don't forget to add a star, because Vest is really cool, and it's an independent open source project. So thank you so much. I had a blast, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evyatar.
Thank you so much.
I think there's some question.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, but how can I ask now?
Wait a minute, please. I will stop there.
Yeah, my question is, like, for data range, like, do you have functions for data range as well?
Data ranges, as in a data has to be either this or that, for example. So,
Yeah.
So Vest has very extensive, and I'll go to vestjs.dev, and inside I added is array of, And we can check that something is array of a bunch of stuff. And you can say it's an is array of is string and is number. And then it can be an array of strings and numbers. We can say that, and we can also build a small schema validation, because Vest also supports shapes and partial shapes. So yes, Vest does this. And also, more than that, so if you have dynamically added fields, you can do each. And then for each of the fields, or for each of the dynamically added items, we can check the same validation. So both sides of data ranges apply.
Yeah, amazing. Congrats! It's a really, really nice framework. I definitely I will try it.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? No? Okay. That's our, thank you very much, Evyatar, for this amazing presentation. And
Thank you.
Sorry for the inconvenience about your flight. I hope we will have another opportunity next time to have it in person. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Have a great day. Goodbye.
You too. Enjoy the rest of the conference, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.